Hey everybody, welcome back. Got the Budget build Nova here. I'm steadily working on it. I've got a 350 engine I picked up from a subscriber. Found a few problems with it, so we're going to take this thing apart, clean it up, hone the block, and throw a rotating assembly in it. So I picked this engine up from a subscriber. It had been running in his Nova. He didn't know a whole lot about it other than it was a 350. He pulled it out to go LS. It's been sitting on a stand for 2 years, and that's all he knew. Now, I picked it up, got a good deal on it, and it's really, I pulled the valve covers off when I got there to look at it. It's really clean. I knew there was a chance there was going to be some rust in the cylinders from sitting. Didn't know how bad it was going to be or if it was going to be there at all. Well, when I got it home, took it apart, as you've seen in the other video on this engine, I had some rust in the cylinders. Now, I was able to clean that rust up and get the cylinder where it was fine. The pistons are 40 over, so, you know, it's not 60 over, so there's some life left in the block. Wasn't too worried about it. I was going to take it apart, clean everything up, put it back together, but when I pulled one of the rod caps off, it looks like the rod bearing had been moving inside the cap. So, the crankshaft looked great, other than the threads are stripped out and there's a half a helicoil in the front of the snout. So what I decided to do was take the rods and pistons out, take the crank out, and put an Eagle rotating assembly in this block after I hone it and clean it up. Now, I could have taken this thing apart and had the rods resized, but most machine shops will tell you they don't want to press off pistons off rods and then resize them and try to put the same pistons back on, because there's a really good chance that they'll break them. It was just, by the time I looked at fixing the front of the crank, resizing the rods, maybe having to buy new pistons, I figured it would be just a better idea to get a rotating assembly. So I went up to Summit Racing, picked up an Eagle rotating assembly. It's already got the rods and the pistons pressed together. It's got a crank, it's balanced, it came with rings and bearings. So I'm going to take this, it's 40 over just like this one. So I'm going to take this apart, hone the cylinders just to clean them up just a tiny bit, deglaze them, and we're going to put it together. I'm going to use the same heads that were on this engine. I got the rust cleaned out of those, and then we're going to stick a Summit brand camshaft in here and we'll be ready. And you can see, I don't know if the camera's going to focus on it, but you can see how that rod cap and bearing have been moving around a little bit. That's not really good. Damn it. Now, that one fell out and I broke the piston, which I'm not reusing it, so that's okay. But you can see on this rod bearing right here, see that dark spot right there? That is usually an indicator of detonation. And when you have the detonation, it's hammering the rod down onto the crankshaft and pushing oil out, and it leaves a mark like that. I'm pretty sure that's what that's from. So anyway, and that may have been, it may have been detonating really bad, and that's what caused it to beat the rods up, and the bearings are loose. Right. Baby Marion doesn't look too bad. That looks okay. I'm going to look at this one. Everything looks all right. All right, so I could have bought rods and pistons and reused this crankshaft, but the snout has some messed up threads in it, and honestly, it was a better deal to buy a complete rotating assembly, so that's what I did. So we're going to get this pulled up out of there. All right, so you really only want to have to clean this thing really good one time. So what I did, I cleaned the cylinders out good enough to where I can hone them without causing more problems. Because if you get any debris in there while you're honing, it's just going to scratch your cylinder up. So I want to make sure my cylinders are debris free as much as possible. I've got my dial bore gauge set up for 4040 at 0. So we're going to see where we're at. And right there we're at 4042. So we're 2 thousandths over right there. It's the same right there. Now let's go farther down in the cylinder. Alright, we're at 402 and a half, so we're at 4040 and a half. So we're at half a thousandths probably of taper. All right, all of them were about the same, so not too terrible bad. So now what we're going to do is get ready to hone this. Now, I'm using a 320 grit dingleberry hone. If you were trying to straighten the cylinders or anything like that, you'd need a rigid hone. A dingleberry hone is made basically to deglaze the cylinders. So my cylinders are pretty straight. I measured them all. They're all about the same. So what I'm going to do is hit them with a dingleberry hone. It's going to just take off enough material to clean up the cylinders, and that's it. I'm probably talking just a few seconds per cylinder, and we should be good to go. All right. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to spray my first cylinder down with some WD-40. I'm going to spray my hone down with some WD-40. And you really don't want this thing, you don't want to put it in there and then spin it. You want to kind of get it spinning before you put it in there. Now I'm going to put it in here for maybe just a few seconds, and we'll see how it works. And that's all. Now, since the last thing I want to do is remove more material because my bores are already a tad bit large, I just had a few seconds in there because I'm really just trying to take the glaze off. And now I'm going to try to wipe it out, see what my cylinder looks like. Which it probably needs more than what I did, but I really don't want to overdo it. It looks okay. Needs just a little bit more. Okay, you can tell it looks pretty good. Cleaned up pretty good. So now we're going to hit the other 7, and then we'll clean the block really well. All right, we got the block all honed up. Cylinders look pretty good. They cleaned up really well. There's a few still stains in there, but not bad at all. Okay, so now that we have the cylinders honed, what I need to do is I need to clean up my head deck surfaces, my front timing chain surface, my oil pan surface, all of that, because I don't want to be doing any cleaning or anything on that with any kind of debris after I wash it really good. So I want to get it, everything I need done to it, clean the outside, clean the inside, whatever I'm going to do, I need to do it before I do my final cleaning so I can put it together. Now what I like to use to clean my decks and all my oil pan rail stuff like that is my little angle die grinder with a brown Scotch Light wheel on there. Going to hit that with it. It leaves a good surface, doesn't really take off any material on cast iron or aluminum wheel. But I'm going to hit the decks and all the gasket surfaces with this, clean everything up, and then we'll clean the outside a little bit with a wire brush and power wash it, be ready to put together. Okay, so we got the short block taken apart. I honed all the cylinders. They look pretty good. There's still a few stains in there from the rust, but not bad. And most of them are at the bottom, which is, if you're going to have any issues, that's where you want them. I got all my gasket surfaces cleaned up, oil pan rail cleaned up, and I hit the outside of the block with a wire brush to knock all the surface rust off where it had been sandblasted a little bit. Now, what I've got to do is take this thing out, pressure wash it, degrease it, clean it, blow through all the oil ports, and then we can get it ready to put together. So we're going to do that in the morning because it's late. Okay, so we're going to start putting this engine together. I've got the block super clean and got all the parts clean. Everything's ready to go. Now, the first thing I usually do when I put the engine together is the camshaft. And you can watch my 307 video. I'll put it up at the top of the page. And basically in that build, I go into a lot of detail about how I build an engine. And I'm definitely no expert engine builder, but I've learned enough over the years to make things easier for you. And one of the reasons I put the cam in first is because if one of the cam bearings, if it's a fresh block that's fresh from machine shop, sometimes cam bearings are crooked. And if you get the whole rotating assembly in and then you put the cam in and the cam bearing is crooked, it's going to suck to take it all back apart, take it to the machine shop, try to get that straightened out. So I always put the cam in first. And then on an engine that's already been together, I didn't have new cam bearings put in it. I don't think I knocked the cam bearing crooked when I pulled the old cam out, but I could have. So anyway, it's mostly habit and a good practice. So I'm gonna throw this cam in. Now this cam is a Summit brand cam. It's got 443 lift and 214 at 50 on the duration, 280 on advertised duration. Probably close to the cam that came out of it. I could only measure lift on the cam that came out of it, and it measured around 440. Now, that's not a really accurate measurement, but it's within a few thousandths. So now duration-wise, who knows where it was at? I don't have any way of measuring that. So we're going to lube this cam up, get it stuck in the block. Okay, what I like to do is lube up my lobes with the cam lube that comes with the cam on half the cam. And then, of course, they make a tool for this, but I just use my hands. And then I use sometimes I use the timing gear with one bolt in it. Put a little assembly lube there. And I'm going to try to get this into the second bearing, and then I can lube up the rest of the cam, or really the third bearing. Alright, so I'm going to put my cam gear on here as a handle. And as much as I do some of this stuff, I should probably just buy me one of those handles. It'd be nice. Maybe next time I ride up to Summit. Alright. So got that bolted on, and I'm going to go in real careful. I got to put some more lube on my bearing journals. Put a little bit on my fuel pump push rod cam lube. I always forget to put the other stuff on there. You want to be real careful not to nick a bearing or knock a bearing around with a cam lobe. Alright, and now that's in. Okay, this rotating assembly came with some king rod and main bearings, so we're going to get those cleaned up, get my main bearings in, get my crank set in here, and then we can get that torqued down and start working on rods and pistons. Now when your bearings say upper on them, they actually go into the block side because it's upside down. Your lower goes into your cap. All right, I got my rear seal in. Now I'm going to set my crankshaft in. I've got my bearings lubed up. I got my seal lubed up. I washed my crankshaft really good and blew through all the holes. Okay, I got my rear main seal in my back cap. Got my bearing lubed up. And I've got my seal offset like you're supposed to do. Okay, so that's one rod and piston, 7 more to go. Okay, the short block is together. So now what I'm going to do is I've got to put some Loctite on the cam bolts, torque them, then I can put the timing cover on, and then the oil pump and pick up drive shaft for the oil pump and then an oil pan. Then we can move to the cylinder heads. Okay, so the oil pan I'm going to use is a Summit brand oil pan. These things are pretty cheap and they're really good quality. I've used them on a couple of different cars. I've got the pickup that goes with it, and I've got a standard volume melling pump for this pickup. And this pickup is specific to a standard volume pump for this pan. The high volume pump or the high pressure pump, either one of those has a different pickup because the body is slightly different. Now, I could have used the pan that came on this engine. There was nothing wrong with it other than it was really dirty. I already had this one laying around, and yeah, so I decided to use it. So I'm really not going to count that against the budget because I could have used the other pan, but I just want to wash it. So we're putting this pump, this pickup on, and I could have used the old pump too. All I would have had to do is take the cover off of it, clean it out, clean the pickup up, and put it all back together, but I didn't. So I am going to include the pickup and the pump in the budget because it's already on the ticket that I use, and I've already done the math. It's there, so I'm not worried about it. I think it was about 60 or 70 bucks for the pump and the pickup, something like that. So we got the engine put together. Now I still have to put my rocker arms, push rods, and lifters in, but I've got the rocker arms soaking so I can clean those, and I'll do that in the morning. Now, this engine kind of, got me off track a little bit as far as price-wise. Not bad. I was able to reuse the heads. I just cleaned them up really well, and I didn't show it on video, but I actually took some of the valves out in the chambers that had a little bit of rust in them. Most of the chambers looked great, but there was 2 of them that had rust in them. I took those valves out, cleaned everything, checked the back side of them, make sure there wasn't any pitting or the valves weren't going to seal. All that looked okay. Now, the cam I went with, probably really close to the cam that was in the thing. Now, I have no idea about the duration of the cam that was in it, but it measured around 440 lift. The cam I put in here has got 443 lift. It's 214 at 50 in duration, and it's a single pattern cam, so it's the same on the intake and exhaust. That ought to be a great cam to use with stock heads and stock springs. I did not change the springs, which you really should change the springs when you change camshaft. But these springs are fairly soft, so I'm hoping that that'll help break in the cam. And then later, if I change the heads or if I sell the car, which is what I plan to do, then someone else changes the heads. You'll have soft springs to break the cam in when I first started up. So that's kind of where my head's at. Now, price-wise, not including the oil pan, I spent $300 on the engine. Now that was in carburetor to oil pan. It was a bouncer, carburetor, oil pan, distributor. I've got all that stuff. Mr. Ronnie gave me a fantastic deal on this. Now it did have some rust in the cylinders, but still the intake and carburetor by itself is worth $300. So it's an Edelbrock carburetor, but I got a fantastic deal on the engine. I'm not upset at all. Now, it sucks that I couldn't use it like it was, but you know what? When an engine sits for a couple of years, that kind of stuff just happens. Okay, so $300 for the engine to get me started. Then when I took it apart, figured out I wanted to put a rotating assembly in it. I knew that was going to hurt my budget a bunch, but it's okay. Ended up with a much better engine, and like I said, I started with pretty good stuff. It's 4-volt main, it's 40 over. Once I got the rod and piston out and realized that I didn't really like the look of the bearings in the rod, I was afraid there was something wrong with the rod size. And if I'm going to sell this car, I really didn't want to do that to someone and give them something I was worried about. So I bought a rotating assembly. Now, I bought a rotating assembly, a oil pump and oil pump pickup. I bought a camshaft and lifters, and I bought a gasket kit. All of that together was right at $1,100. Plus the $300 I already spent on getting the engine. And remember, that was carburetor, distributor, oil pan, everything. So I've got $1,400 in it. Now that's not bad for a practically new engine. The heads do have some miles on them, but this thing did not have a lot of miles on it to start with. So I'm not too worried about the heads. I could have changed the valve springs for another $60 or $70, but that's really aggravating. And me or whoever gets this thing will probably end up changing the heads later. So that's where we're at. Now, I have been a little sick. A lot of people ask me, hey, did you have COVID? No, I did not have COVID. I started having some dizzy spells and stuff like that. Anytime I lay down or bend over out here, anything like that, I started getting dizzy. Arms started hurting, chest was hurting, stuff like that. So I haven't been able to work for the last couple of weeks too much at all. Now, I'm fine. I've got some, my blood pressure's been out of control, is the main problem. So we're going to, doctor's adjusting all that. Everything's going to be good, but I'm probably not going to get this car done in time. I'm not even sure if I can go to Daytona now, because on the day we're supposed to leave on Wednesday, I'm supposed to be at the doctor's office doing a stress test. So I'm not sure how that's going to end up, but I'm going to try to get this car done. The engine's done. I'm going to put the transmission together tomorrow. I've still got several days, and I'm going to put the transmission together tomorrow. I'm going to put the subframe together the day after that, and I'm going to try to put all this thing together and at least get it where I can run it and drive it out of the shop. So anyway, guys, stay tuned. There's more videos coming. I'm going to get this thing done as fast as I can. Still going as cheap as I can do it, but we're hitting some bumps. Anyway, we'll see you next time.